Welcome back to another episode of Sexy Marriage Radio. Sorry, I got to let the music just run for a little bit just because it's such good intro music. This is Dr. Corey Allen, where we are having honest, straightforward conversations because we really do believe that married sex is the hotbed for sex. And so this being just the world we live in, where there's just the information out there is too much, anything goes. I am pleased to be joined on this episode of Sexy Marriage Radio by a colleague that I was just introduced to, as in like 10 minutes ago is when we first met face to face for this show. Nancy Houston's going to be joining me in just a minute, where we're going to talk dive into some things that are just some pretty important comments and topics that have come in through the inbox. And the way we know what the listeners are looking for is two different ways. One, you can give us a call, leave us a voicemail, 214-702-9565, or the inbox, feedback@sexymarriageradio.com, where that gives us all kinds of comments, questions, thoughts. And the one that has come up, I was telling Nancy this as we were getting ready for the show, that is on menopause, because even in the last year and a half, there's 28 emails that have come in with that word somewhere within it. And so Nancy Houston is a licensed professional counselor. She lives in Southlake, which is near McKinney, where I live. So we're just 20 minutes apart from each other, 30 minutes apart from each other. But she's a licensed professional counselor and a certified sex therapist. She's also the author of a brand new book, Love and Sex, The Christian Guide to Healthy Intimacy. So Nancy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Corey. It's great to be here with you.
Yes, it is. And so since we're just getting to know each other, I would love introduce yourself to the audience, I guess, for a little bit, just so that way they have an idea. They know who I am. So I want to make sure they know who you are, because you're worth knowing.
Okay, well, thank you. It's so great to meet you, Corey. I'm so glad to be here with you. I have been married for almost 44 years, married my high school sweetheart right out of high school. We have 4 adult sons who are all married, and we have 8 grandbabies. So,
congratulations.
Life has been good to us. I grew up in a home where my dad he was a World War II vet, and he had PTSD. And he also had a head injury riding bulls and rodeo before he became an
Okay.
Yes, people called him Wild Bill. He was kind of a wild man.
Mm-hmm.
And he drank a lot and partied a lot. And so I just grew up with quite a bit of trauma, actually. And so worked through that in my 30s. Not that I consider that more of a journey, not like, kind of like, okay, that's all done, going in that box.
Oh, absolutely.
And part of that, I had to work through some sexual trauma as well.
Okay.
And when I was working through that, I kept thinking, God, I wish there was like more of a pathway for people where we could have more conversations about this, where I know I felt sort of alone and like, oh, I'm weird, I'm the only one. And, which just isn't true, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know the statistics for females are really astronomical. And I think for males, I just don't think it gets reported.
Right.
And so I wrote this book called Love and Sex to really give people a guide. How do we work through our stuff that keeps us from having a great sex life? And how do we become healthy and whole? And so this book it truly is just a guide. And whether somebody's struggling with some sexual trauma like I had, maybe sexual harassment, or, even feel guilty for playing doctor when they're kids, or they're struggling with porn, or, whatever the issue is. Some couples really get into swinging. I mean, there's all kinds of sexual things that happen to people.
Absolutely.
And so in this book, I just address it through stories. Really, I use stories. I have characters, and just wanted to make it safe for people to go, oh, me too. Oh, I deal with that,
Yep. So, well, and I mean, what you're describing is probably the best path forward for a lot of married couples, is the idea of how do we find good information that truly does help without singling out or even jumping to labels or the magic bullet, even though I think every single one of us wants the magic bullet, right?
Absolutely.
I've jokingly said, if I could figure out the key to fantastic sex or even just successful marriages, I would be the world's first trillionaire.
Yes, you would be.
Because everybody wants that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't exist as far as here is the path. And what's interesting to me with this conversation that you and I can have is, okay, so tell me if I'm wrong in what your experience has been with the clients, and then even the 44 years of married life, and then being a guide to your kids and your sons in their married life to a degree, I'm sure, because any kid raised by therapists, come on.
Yeah.
It's an interesting dinner table conversations
Yeah,
typically.
right.
So it seems to me, as soon as we get a stage figured out in life, a new one starts.
Oh, great.
Right?
Isn't that the truth? Like, statistically, they say 60% of couples are having a sexual issue right this moment.
Yep.
And so it's kind of like, yeah, if you weren't in there, yay for you, but you probably will be,
Yep. You will be soon. Yep.
You will be. And, I think our sexuality just presents some challenges for us, but if we will have the courage to work through them, then we always end up in a deeper, richer, better place.
True. And
If we
so,
avoid them, that gets us.
and that's, yeah. And I think that's kind of where I want to start with you, just because the idea of when menopause hits for a wife, typically, they may still want sex to occur. Their husband probably still wants sex to occur. I'm going based on the emails I've read. And it is one of those that, if you look at the chronological lens of this, they typically, right before menopause hits, is when they've kind of hit their sweet spot of vibrancy, if you will, of a woman, kind of her sexuality waking up in her 40s.
Mm-hmm.
Is kind of what the trends show or state. And some of that is societal, shock value stuff, but some of it's some truth. But so as soon as you got it, like, man, this is really, really good. And now all of a sudden menopause comes in, or you could have a hysterectomy because of some medical issues, and that's going to create menopausal symptoms. So what are some of the other things that are part of this? Because this fits into where you're phrasing this of 60% are in a difficulty, but the others aren't. Well done, but you probably will, because every woman is going to face this. Every marriage is going to face this.
Yes.
So what are some other factors? Because I don't want to just land completely on menopause. What are some other things that kind of come along as you go along as a woman in married life?
Well, I think if we are going to focus on menopause for just a few moments, I think it's a bigger deal than we know it is.
Okay.
Yeah, just as when I went through menopause, it was a really hard time. I was diagnosed with lupus about the same time.
Okay.
And one of the things a pharmacist thankfully said to me is that Stanford has done huge research on the role of hormones in autoimmune disease. And so he goes, Nancy, go get your hormones checked, because it will help with the menopause symptoms. It'll help with the lupus. It'll help with everything you're experiencing. And, I have a really good friend who actually was working for me, and she kept saying to me, well, Nancy, my doctor's saying I don't have any hormones. And I'm like, well, girlfriend, you got to do something about that, because you're menopause. And she just loves to work out. And she's like, I'm like, Kathy, working out more isn't going to help this. You can't function without hormones.
Right.
And, man, our hormones start decreasing as we age, but boom, you hit menopause, and things hormonally fizzle pretty quickly.
Okay.
And that makes such a difference to your health, because basically our brain is made up of hormones and fat and water. And if we don't have hormones, then our brain's not going to work. We get forgetful, we get foggy, we get moody, we get depressed, we get anxious. you start having like vaginal dryness, the walls of the vagina start thinning. I mean, all these things that don't make sex fun,
Mm-hmm.
and really can create some tension in marriage. And, I know that men don't go through as radical as a change as women do, but I still think there's menopause.
Oh, absolutely there is.
Right. And if his testosterone levels have dived, he's going to get moody. He's going to lose interest in life. He might get depressed, kind of cranky. And so I'm just a huge proponent in find a great doctor, get your hormones tested. I'm also a
Okay.
huge fan of the bioidentical, but I've heard for some folks that bioidentical are fabulous, and for some, synthetic work better for them.
Okay.
I like the bioidentical because they match your body, and you don't have some of the side effects that maybe you do with the synthetic.
Okay.
But yeah, I completely recovered from lupus. I'm lupus free, and I think
Awesome.
I think part of it is because I got my hormones squared away.
Well, I mean, think about it. It's almost like the baseline for the operating system
It really is,
of
Corey.
life. And so, just for clarification, just so my audience is up to date, bioidentical and synthetic. Explain those two just briefly, so people that are driving along going, "I have no idea what she just said."
Right. So, and nowadays we have bioidentical pellets, which can just be inserted under the skin, and then they are released over time. So you
Right.
just have this nice steady flow. And, that personally is not my favorite. Now, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not anybody's doctor. And
Well,
so
this has just been your journey.
yes. So
Yep.
they kind of, we all kind of have to figure out our own journey. But I would just encourage anybody who's getting close to menopause, or you're having some PMS, or for men, you're just like, you're not yourself. You're losing your drive. You're losing interest in sex. You're losing interest maybe even in your work. You
Mm-hmm.
just kind of feel blah.
Mm-hmm.
Just go get those tested. And bioidentical match your body. And they aren't made from synthetic products. They're made from natural products that match what you
Okay.
naturally make. And synthetic are more, artificial. But again, for some folks, those work for them. So
Absolutely.
find
So,
what works for you and do.
right. So truly, it's finding a trusted guide to help you navigate and find. Here's my alternatives. We could test this out. We could check this out. We can explore this more, and have somebody that at least is walking alongside this with you. Is what
Yeah,
if
and
it's a
like my
medical
friend
professional.
I mentioned, she, her doctor kind of forced her, like, we have to get you on hormones. In the meantime, she'd been put on a lot of antidepressants and medications, but once her hormones stabilized, then she's able to really cut way back on the medication. She'll probably be off of them in a short amount of time. And it's like she's gotten herself back.
Right.
you
Right.
know so I can't overemphasize the importance of hormones. They are huge in our lives, and we just need to pay better attention to them. Even like for mommies, maybe you're having some postpartum depression, and I would encourage women, have those hormones checked and know that they're a big deal.
Okay.
And actually, my gynecologist said, Nancy, most women who live through menopause will live a long life. But menopause, like for me, I was diagnosed with lupus during that time. My mother actually died during menopause. My mother-in-law had a heart attack during menopause. And I'm like, we treat it kind of casually.
Yeah.
I think historically it used to be easier for females to go through menopause, but we have a lot of hormones in our foods and plastics. We're just exposed to so much more. I think it's a little harder on our bodies now than it used to be. And so if you're struggling, find a guide. I
Yeah.
like that, Corey. That's a good term. Find a guide.
Yeah. Because that adds a question to me of how does our diet play into this?
Oh,
Because you're alluding to. I mean, we don't know. We're just now finding the repercussions of mass produced food. They're more and more is being discovered all the time, and this is not vegan radio or all organic radio, obviously. So we're not going to go way down that path. But specifically speaking, I know our nutrition plays a role in the seasons that we do in life.
Oh, it's so big, Corey. And, if you aren't feeling great, the tendency is to eat more comfort food, to stop exercising, all the things that are kind of the opposite of what we need to do.
Yep.
Exercise is so important, and adjusting our diets as we age. When we're young, we can kind of eat whatever and
Hmm.
our body's like fine with it. But
Yep.
as we age, our body starts getting way more finicky, and like we feel sick if we eat sugar or even some people dairy products. Like for me, when I had lupus, I went all grain-free, dairy-free, sugar-free,
Okay.
all organic, and lots of supplements.
Okay.
So I'd encourage everybody, like, be on a good vitamin D, be on a good vitamin C, a multivitamin,
Okay.
feed your body, right?
Yes. That's the operating system has to be tended to all the way through. So I want to pivot to, because this is good information in regards to what do I need to do individually? So I need to find a good guide that's a medical professional that's aware of what are my resources, what's the things I can do. So now I want to shift to relational,
Yeah.
because menopause is not done in a vacuum.
No.
so going through it impacts a marriage. So what have you seen in your own journey, if you're willing to go there, but also in your clients and the people you've walked alongside? What are the things to be aware of, and then what are the things that will help as you go through?
Yeah. So, that was a hard season for my husband and I. We were like launching our 4 kids, adjusting to almost an empty nest. And we really had to redefine our marriage at that point, Corey. And my
Mm-hmm.
husband, honestly, we eventually did get some help. Like when I was in the middle of lupus and menopause, I'm like, hey, we need to go see like a marriage therapist right now because we are struggling. And, my husband was angry that in many ways he had lost the wife he knew, because I had to
Sure.
close down my private practice. I had to, and it took me a couple of years to get back on my feet again. And I wish I would have had somebody earlier saying, "Hey, Nance, let's look at this. Let's look at your hormones. Let's look at all these things a little more ahead of time than instead of me getting to crisis."
Yep.
And, oftentimes when men are depressed, they don't really say, "Hey, I'm really sad that you're struggling. I'm really sad that I feel like I've lost the wife I've known. I'm really sad that we've lost your income. It's like for men, it oftentimes comes out as anger.
Yep.
And so, for me, I'm like, why are you being such a jerk?
Exactly.
I need
Exactly.
to be soft and nurturing right now because I'm struggling. And instead you seem angry and difficult.
Yep.
And so, it was so great when we went and talked to a third party, because he's like, Ron, I think actually you're pretty depressed about all this and it's coming out as anger, and that doesn't help Nancy and makes you a little bit scary and, hurts her feelings. And
Mm-hmm.
so good. We got some help. And, honestly, like probably 3 years after I fully recovered, Ron went through his own health struggle, and he had quadruple heart bypass surgery, which
Okay.
looking at him, you'd never know. He looked super fit and athletic,
Right.
and was having thyroid issues. And also his testosterone levels were in the pits. So we kind of went through like 4 or 5 years where it was just hard.
Yep.
And we just have to sit down and go, wow, this is really hard. Like, this is a hard season, because
Mm-hmm.
up until that point, marriage had been like, most of 90% of the time, we really enjoyed being married to each other, right? And then we're in this season where it's like, oh,
Yep.
this is hard. This is awful. How are we going to get through it? But, God's faithful, and we got help. And
That's good. And I think just the idea of acknowledging the situation is a huge step,
it
because
is.
how often do we as humans Yeah, we have a level of awareness that we're in the midst of struggle. We know, I mean, we're not clueless
Right.
to the struggle and the pain and the frustration and the anger that we feel. But how often do we have an objective awareness on a deeper level to say, hold on,
Yeah.
this is a tough spot. We are in a tough situation right now. You've got your journey, I've got mine. They overlap, and that's not always good. We don't help each other in this regard. And this is where I have the phrase that I've used with a lot of clients, that human beings are the only species on the planet that when we feel lost, we actually speed up.
Yeah.
And all the other species, because they're typically lower down the predatorial prey scale, so they have life that they got to be aware of their surroundings a whole lot more, because a little deer wandering into a predator's territory, they got no shot. But they will stop and get their bearing when they're lost before they proceed. And we don't do that a whole lot, for sure. Even relationally, we just got a lot of crisis, and so therefore I just blame, and I just try to avoid or erupt or encourage, in the sense of, you need to get yourself fixed, honey, because it's not my problem, it's and rather than realizing it, like you're saying, of just being aware of, we're in a tough spot. That's a huge shift.
Yeah,
And
it really is. It allows you to pump the brakes, slow down, stop hunting the bad guy.
yep.
It was just a hard season for us. It wasn't anybody's fault. It just was what it was.
Right.
And, to stop hunting the bad guy, and like, if you do this, I wouldn't do this. And that
Yep.
just gets us nowhere, because, there's no bad guy here. We're just two married people trying to figure this out, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so, that really helped us, and realize, like, we're stuck. And when we're stuck, you just have to find a guide. You've got to find, okay, what are our options here? What can we do to both feel better, deal with this better, grieve our losses, face the negative realities, and
Yep.
and work on our attachment. Because, I think another thing for us is, we'd been really busy raising 4 sons, getting them all through college. And, I was getting my master's degree while we had 3 sons in college, if you can imagine that. So,
Not much going on then.
right. And so we needed to kind of push the pause button in a lot of ways. And like, who are we as just husband and wife, as man
Yep.
and woman? And who do we want to be going forward, without children, and having these busy lives filled with children and their activities? How do we want to redefine you and I?
Yep.
And so, it was really, I'm grateful for that season. It was hellish, but it was awesome too.
Yep.
We did a lot of hard work, and it was worth
Yep.
it.
Well, that's where we get that hindsight of being able to see it, of like, I see what this has produced. And that's where the more and more encouragement I hope people would hear is, even when I'm in the midst of this kind of turmoil and burden and crisis, it can produce something to where you actually look back and go, wow, I would not have learned this any other way to this degree, for sure, had I not gone through this, because it does reveal. I mean, that's the crucible, if you will, of life. So I want to land on your idea of, we had to kind of redefine who we were, because I think that also lends itself to, we need to have a conversation of, how do you redefine your sex life in this time too, right? Because it's not going to be what it was necessarily. There might be semblances and markers, but it seems like this is a time, if you're talking about a woman experiences vaginal dryness, well, let's even back up before that. Libido can be totally gone. His could be totally gone. And, there's $1 billion industry out there for the men, on take the blue pill or take this one, or, you wind up sitting in bathtubs next to each other at the sunset, which don't understand.
It's
Don't
perfect.
understand that, but, but be in the same bathtub. Come on, it's a whole lot more fun. Anyway, but it's just that, so you got libido could be gone, vaginal dryness can happen, even the thinning of the vaginal walls can happen. so now you're talking about, we do need to redefine our sex life.
Yeah.
So what would be some tips, some, let's give some language to people that can help steer conversations that then can be applied as they need to.
Corey, I think when couples come to this point, it can present so many challenges. This is where many couples just say, it's too much work, let's give up on it.
Okay.
And I think that's one thing that Ron and I were like, no, we're not willing to do that. We're going to keep
Right.
our sex life on the front burner. And I know several times when I was in the middle of lupus, and you have a lot of pain. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's very painful. And I would say to my husband, I'm like, well, do you want to make love to me? And he's like, no, you're in too much pain. And I'm like, well, but the basic parts still work, honey. So, I would still invite him, like, let's still make love. Let's not let this part of ourselves die. And let's do whatever we need to do to keep sex on the front burner of our marriage
Okay.
for the rest of our lives. And so let's be fun and creative. And, thankfully I did get the bioidentical pellets pretty quickly, and which helps with the lubrication, the sex drive, the desire. And then he ended up getting the bioidentical pellets as well.
Okay.
And yeah, after he had his heart surgery, and he was just like, I just don't feel good. I don't feel right. So we kept like, okay, well, let's find a new doctor. Let's find somebody who will help with the whole picture. And we found this amazing doctor, and he got Ron's thyroid squared away. He got his testosterone up to healthy levels. And, we're 62, and I'm like, we have such a great sex life. And,
Fantastic.
we just marvel at, oh my gosh, we thought we had a great sex life at 20, but we feel like it just keeps getting better and better and richer and richer. And we're like,
Yeah.
who knew this was possible?
Well, I mean, there's a correlation to good sex and age. There
Yeah.
just is, because we get more comfortable with ourselves,
Yeah, we do.
more importantly. But I do like your framework of, I've got to make this a priority. I've got to see the importance of it, not just relationally, but also for myself. Sometimes one's going to carry more weight than the other. The relationship will carry my drive versus, no, I want this for me. But I also love the idea of taking your care serious enough to where one doctor does not have all of the answers.
No.
That sometimes if I'm not getting the answer I want, or that is in line with what I'm believing or have heard or whatever, then seek out additional help, because take it serious in that regard. And I find so many couples that don't. They're like, well, they said that, and I guess we're just stuck with this. And no, you're not.
True, Corey. Like Ron's cardiologist, we brought it up with his cardiologist, and he just kind of, I don't know, I think he gave us a Woody Allen line or something. And it's like, I'm a sex therapist. I'm like, seriously?
Right.
And I'm like, Ron, we got to find somebody who will help you. And we found this great doctor, and Ron was like, Nancy, it's so expensive. I'm like, who cares? If you don't have your health, nothing else really matters.
This is investing in self. And that's the one thing that, that's being a professional in the therapeutic world. You probably have the same bent I do of, if people will invest in enrichment, it's far cheaper than the crisis.
That's right.
And dealing with it later. So it's seeing that dynamic of, okay, I need to seek out the help. I need to use the resources that are available to me. And then I would even say, tell me if I'm off on a wrong tangent with this, but even for a time while you're figuring these things out, just because vaginal dryness is there, well, there's lubrications that are involved, and you can go natural to synthetic.
That's right.
Across the board, whatever works in your own comfort. That would help. But then there's also, sex does not just mean intercourse.
No, absolutely. You can have a ton of fun together and be very sexual with each other without having intercourse, and like you said, Corey, I think as you age, you get more comfortable with your body. You learn how to keep strengthening that attachment and that bond through, intimate conversation, sharing deeper emotions.
Yep.
And that just creates a safety. And then For me, I have this belief that God made sex for women too.
Oh, yeah,
Big part,
amen.
you know? And so I'm like, heck no, this is good for me. I'm not giving up on this. And orgasms are great for a couple to have because they release all these feel good hormones that just strengthen your bond and your attachment.
Mm-hmm.
They're basically attachment hormones that you release when you have
Right.
sex together, when you go
Right.
skin to skin. And it's like, have you ever seen that older couple in a restaurant where they sit there and they eat together, but they don't talk?
Yep.
And I used to say to my husband, I never want to be that couple. Like, I want us to stay vibrant together. And I think
Mm-hmm.
part of that is keeping sex alive and good and vibrant.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about sex and marriage, and the way I believe and you believe it's designed, and that it's a secret language and bond that is only shared between two people. And so you can be in any kind of situation, and you can get those looks at each other, and or it's that whole, yeah, last night, and you know exactly what was going on, and no one else does, and that's the cool sacredness of this journey. That when we see the value of it and the importance of it, even knowing seasons are going to change in life, right? Things are going to shift and evolve. But that's all right. I'm not alone in this. I've got a partner that's along board with me. Is on board with me. She or he's available, and hopefully we can be allies in this thing.
Yeah, that's so true, Corey. It's keeping this all alive doesn't happen automatically.
Exactly.
It's a lot of work.
Yep.
It sometimes includes a lot of tears.
Yep.
But just this perseverance that we are not going to let our sex life die, and we're not going to let our connection die, and we're going to move towards each other, and we're going to partner together and figure this out no matter what it takes.
Yep. And that's what makes it valuable. Working for it. We've earned it, and then we get so much more from it. All right. Well, Nancy, thank you. So tell everybody how do they find you? How do they get a copy of this book?
Yeah. So here's what the book looks like. Pretty red cover, and again, it's called Love and Sex, and you can get it at Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
And I hope that this book will truly be a guide to help people work through their bumps and lumps,
Yep, absolutely.
and then get to a really sweet spot sexually, and at least start fighting for it. Like,
yes.
Don't give up on it, but
Yep.
it's worth working through. And Corey, the thing is, we all want to avoid, don't we?
Yes.
This book will encourage people to, like, no, you know what? It's okay to face stuff, and there's a way through it.
Good.
And I don't have to be stuck, but there's hope for me, and there's hope for my marriage, and there's just a lot of hope.
And the beautiful thing is that it's told through stories.
Yeah.
And the one thing that humans were drawn to is the idea that if someone else has gone through it, and hey, you know what? Maybe I can do it too. So thank you for being vulnerable with this, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with the Sexy Marriage Nation.
Oh, my pleasure.
I do appreciate this. So if we've left something undone or we need to go further, please feedback at sexymarriageradio.com. That's how you can let us know. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, thanks for taking some time out of your day to spend it with us. We'll see you next time.